You all set? Okay, untitled film about how everything has gone to shit and we're all pretty much fucked. Take one.
Okay, rolling.
Hi.
Do you want me to start with a joke?
As long as you're prepared for me not to necessarily laugh at it.
I don't know if I can emotionally handle that.
Then don't.
I'm gonna do it anyways. What's Beethoven's favorite fruit?
Bum bum bum. Banana?
Consumption is the act of consuming things. And a lot of those things are the stuff we need to survive. But we are entering into an era where even if our basic needs are met, we buy more and more stuff that's been designed to be used for a distressingly small amount of time. Particularly our clothing, which accounts for up to 10% of carbon emissions and is filling our landfills with regrettable fashion decisions.
Do we really want to tell this story? Ugh.
The decrease in quality and acceleration of turning resources into rubbish is doing bad things to our planet, which is bad because that's where almost all of us live. Until now, no one has ever really bothered to look into it. Join us as we talk to leading experts in the field.
Feels like I'm a sociopath because I'm like looking into the camera and I'm like, now's the end of the sentence.
I'm gonna drink some pretend coffee. I'm so sharp.
Hold the perpetrators accountable.
All right, Pedro, we're gonna ask you some tough questions.
And embark on an investigation into why the things we use to cover up our naughty bits have all gone to shite.
We have this enormous problem that is threatening the entire world.
Some of the most devastating social, environmental problems were embedded in our garments.
And we're just like, shit, well, what do we do?
Many scientists and historians think we're entering into a new epoch, one where things are simply crappier. Come with us as we investigate this new era of the Shitthropocene.
I got nothing to lose, I'm more to prove than to quit. I'm accustomed to moves you gotta use. Walk a mile in my shoes.
The Shitthropocene is characterized by things that are shitty, like a global decrease in the standard of living, consumer products that simply fall apart, and cooking websites where you have to read someone's whole life story before you can get to the recipe. You might be wondering, how do we decide this is the world we want to live in? It couldn't have happened by accident, like the invention of gravity or the periodic resurrection of the McRib. It was a really long string of decisions made by human beings that got us here. But in order to understand how we got to this place, we'd have to understand how decisions were even made. It turns out, decisions are made mostly in something scientists are calling the brain.
What is the meaning of life? Why do we do the things we do? If I perceive this color as blue and you perceive it as blue, is it the same thing? All those kind of questions that you start asking. This is what we call biologic decision making. It's a process that began 3 billion years ago when a single cell happened to have a mutation that allowed it to change shape when it encountered a chemical in its environment.
This single-celled fella's name was Stephen. He had a friend named Brian, who was a bit of a pudding pie. But together they were about to invent what we now call a decision.
It's not exactly a decision the way we think of human decisions, but a cell, a single cell, can go towards something that is nutritious and away from something that's toxic.
And that's why there is no one named Brian anymore. Stephen, however, went on to great things. Over the years, Stephen multiplied hundreds, if not thousands of times. Some of the Stevens joined together to become big scary lizards. Some became big scary fish, while the boring ones turned into plants. The only Stevens that were successful, though, were the ones that made good decisions for billions of years, until evolution culminated in the silliest of all possible life forms.
Nobody was named Stephen 100,000 years ago, but anyway. So the things that determine the design of our neural equipment were things that had survival advantage.
These survival advantages were things like the ability to make and use tools, or seduce other cave people to make wee cave sprogs.
So if you are hungry, hot, tired, and you come across food, it is intensely rewarding. You get a powerful dopaminergic reward to help teach you what you need to survive. You're more likely to survive if you crave and seek and obtain. So we consume because if we didn't consume, we'd die. The problem is that while evolution gave us consumption that was matched to our needs, now we are able to consume way more than we need. You have unlimited, almost, amounts of goods, and it requires energy and resources to make those goods. And so, our enormous capacity to consume is no longer a survival advantage when you think about the planetary consequences.
One of these survival advantages was protecting your caveman body from the elements. As cold weather had just been invented, ironically at the same time our ancestors lost their fur. It's hard to imagine, but online shopping hadn't been discovered yet, so you had to leave your cave and steal an animal's clothes if you didn't want your bits freezing off. Now we have a system where we can send away something called money. Imaginary numbers that represent how many hours we've spent making rich people more rich. And days or even hours later, things show up at our door, whether we need it or not. Clothing was once used to keep us protected from the elements, but is now primarily used to flex on an online platform called TikTok before being thrown away. To understand if this smorgasbord of questionable transactions is altogether necessary, we sent a crew to document the ongoing efforts of a randomly selected clothing company that had nothing to do with the funding of this film.
Hello. Check, check. All right, can I cuss in this? I'm trying not to.
Oh,
all right.
sorry. There will be absolutely no swearing in this film.
Fuck.
She won't like this film if you see these.
I'm not actually going to watch it, so.
Yeah.
I understand that your hats are made of fishing nets. So what happens if the fishermen want them back?
That's a good question.
So what about the other planets? Can't we just go there once we're done here? So tell me more about how your shit doesn't really stink.
There's a sunk cost to the planet for every product that we make. Our job is to live in the tension of trying to save the home planet by virtue of making and selling stuff. Patagonia, the apparel company, is a spin-off of Shitthropocene Equipment, which is a climbing equipment business.
When we started making climbing gear, it was a life and death situation. And so quality's always been extremely important to us.
As we started making more and different things, quality needed to evolve at the same time.
Early on, Ivan followed a set of core principles on how he was going to approach making product, the design quality philosophy.
Environmental impact was not always the heartbeat of our decision-making process, but throughout our history, durability has really been the hallmark.
And durability shares a wonderful space with minimizing the cost to the environment.
We're trying to use this company as a tool for social change, and we're trying to show other companies that by doing things right, you can also do very well at it too.
Quality is an environmental issue. Doing fewer things better, and as a result, selling fewer products out into the world. We learned a whole lot through that process, and what we learned was that it's really hard to do high-quality apparel and to do it well.
So one of the realities is you're not always going to get it right. And that's actually, I think, part of the important recipe, because you learn so much more from that which was not easy and that was hard won.
All right, so were there any mishaps that were like particularly informative?
I'm trying to decide whether this should be on film. Fuck it, let's go.
So, yeah, funniest thing ever. One day, we get a call from Ivan.
Ivan wanted Patagonia to make fishing waders. And he was like, let's figure out a better way.
And waders are the most complicated and technical product you could make.
People hike 15 miles in it, poking holes in something that we're asking to be waterproof.
It gets submerged under the water. So if there is one pinhole anywhere below the water, it's gonna leak.
In 18 months, we developed the first waders. They were selling like crazy. And then season after season, we made slightly different versions.
And then the Rio Gallegos come out. And we're like, oh shit.
The waders we had were leaking on the first outing.
The problem at first was the back seam. I guess you could say the butt crack. No, it's the butt, and the front is the crotch zone. Yeah, the front butt.
We've just manufactured thousands of wader products, a whole new seasonal line in which the products were dramatically failing.
And that's when we were like, okay, this is a big problem.
Waders in particular are one of our most carbon-intensive products that we make. And if we fail, it's just gonna end up in a landfill.
This is not what we want to stand for. Even though it might cost us a lot of money and a lot of heartache, we have to figure this out. If we're not doing that, we're failing as a company.
It turns out making things that last forever is a bit more of a challenge than previously thought. Unless you're making things out of whatever dinosaur bones are made of. And speaking of dinosaurs and old things, when we last left our furless friend Stephen, he was busy inventing things like fire and the first selfie. But contrary to popular belief, our society has come a long way in 1 million years or so since hunter-gatherer times. The next biggest milestone in the story of humanity was the invention of the hot dog, then corn dogs, then dogs in a blanket, which was later changed to pigs in a blanket because they weren't even made of dogs after all that. But sadly, these innovations in meat tube technology have been lost to time. We sat down with a historian to find out what happened next with humanity.
So what comes after cavemen in history?
Well, I can tell you a story about architecture.
Sure. Seems like we're skipping a bunch, but you're the historian.
I thought so. There are houses where you will not find any closets. Instead, what you will find is a built-in hook on the wall of the bedroom. And the reason for that is that people owned 2 sets of clothes, one for every day and the other one for church.
Or, as they used to say, one for working the sod and one for talking with God.
And if you think about the fact that you have to grow the textile, spin it, weave it, and sew it, that sounds about right.
So how do we get from this to this?
The way that I think we today think about fashion, in some ways you can trace back to Louis Couture's.
Louis Couture.
Couture's, as opposed to like couture, like Louis XIV.
Yeah.
I should just say Louis XIV. I don't want to sound like...
It's too late now.
Should I start over with Louis XIV?
Sure.
All right. Louis XIV is the king, Colbert is his finance minister, and together they come up with a really smart plan to boost sales of Lyon-produced silk. So this was actually part of a project to raise France's revenue. Not only did they make it illegal to buy foreign luxury goods, they also instituted a rule by which after a certain time of year, you had to switch over and start buying velvet and silk. So they had the, silk makers in Lyon change patterns so that you could tell who was wearing last year's silk. You wanted me to say, and that's how they invented the fashion season.
They said the best things in life are free, but that don't fly with the birds and bees. I got expenses and I got needs. I need to spend me a little more G's.
Seasons had first been invented so farmers knew when to plant food, and so poets would have cold, sad months when they could write poetry. But unlike those seasons, this one was made up by some wiggy bureaucrats so Louis XIV could buy more tiny shoes and posh houses. But similar to those original seasons, it created some problems.
Suddenly, the aristocratic woman has to figure out a way to signal that she's better than you. So then she has to come up with some kind of special cut of her dress or way that she's doing her, like headgear. Headgear. I feel like there should be a more technical word for that. So there's an acceleration in the amount of garments that people own because you always have to stay one step ahead of the person behind you on the social scale.
Ironically enough, fashion wasn't the only thing that had a revolution. But as the innovations of the next 3 centuries made it possible to meet people's needs, the seeds of consumerism planted then blossomed into flowers of industrialism and imperialism. But instead of allowing people to survive without struggle, or perhaps to let us take a bit of a fucking break, this new extractive system had to justify itself by making up ways to make us want more and more.
Well, marketing and advertising as a field kind of comes into being in the 1920s. Its whole way of working is to take this dissatisfaction that people are feeling in their industrial jobs, in their jobs that aren't really that creative, in work that suddenly doesn't have quite as much meaning as it might have in the past. And rather than take that dissatisfaction and anger sometimes that's prone at this moment to direct itself towards the capitalists, towards a political system that is quite unfair, advertising changed that dissatisfaction into the desire to buy something. People didn't necessarily want a washing machine. Suddenly it's like, how do we sell the washing machine and what do we do with all of this discontent? And these two things kind of like come together beautifully in the science of marketing. It actually was a very powerful moment, I think. The whole advertising apparatus learned how to transform people's dissatisfaction with their lives into money and power.
But how does being crossed at a global system of exploitation send us down the path of consumerism? The answer lies in the brain of our friend Stephen. It turns out that the things that make him really good at surviving and passing on his genes can be used to make him do things that don't have a whole lot to do with surviving or passing on his genes. To illustrate this point, we've hired this actor who fancies himself Cary Grant, a real cad, to play the role of a corporate muttonhead and go head-to-head against our Steve in a battle of modern techniques versus our caveman brains. But not a real battle, more of a pretend battle.
Fear of missing out and last chance deals cause our brain to think about scarcity. So instead of you thinking about how great this shirt is that you could get, you start worrying about losing out. And so you buy it and you feel a strong reward in your brain.
Our tragically simple friend Stephen thinks he's won. But in reality,
we also respond strongly to how good the deal is. Medial prefrontal cortex, a specific part of brain circuitry, actively codes for how reasonable the price is.
Stephen thinks he scored a smashing deal. But the muttonhead wins the day.
There's also novelty in getting us to buy things. Think about a shirt that you have in your closet right now. Over time, you get used to it, and your brain circuits get used to it too. So the new things that you see are even more exciting in comparison. And so you buy and buy and buying more and more things. These marketing tactics habituate our brains to continued consumption. Buying more and more things feels more and more normal. But maybe some of the decisions you're making are happening because of outside influences that might not be the ones that you wanted to use.
Advertising always capitalizes on people's fears, I think. It's like, I'm afraid I'm never going to find love. I'm afraid I'm never going to get in shape. I'm afraid I'm never going to get hired. All of those fears are exactly what advertisers use to make you want to buy a thing. Marketing really does quite consciously attempt to transform people's dissatisfaction with their lives and direct it into a purchase.
Marketing says that reward is happiness, that when I get that little buzz from something new or somebody attractive or some entertainment, that's happiness.
If that were true, those of us caught in the web of consumerism would be the happiest people on the planet. We buy more and more. We go to our jobs, make money, and fill up our lives with things we buy. But while our closets might be full, our hearts are empty. But are we really that vulnerable? Are we so easily manipulated by flashy advertisements? More on that after this flashy advertisement.
Forget everything you thought you knew about fishing waders. And make way for the X2000 Ripple Ninja. This latest innovation, Fish Pants, is here to change the whole f***ing game. With a sick new design and an impenetrable front butt, and an insane price of just half $1,000. That costs less than a little boy's bicycle, and you're a grown-ass man with a beard. This deal is so damn hot, it must be reeled in before it's too damn late. We have one pair left with your name on it. Better get it before you shrivel up into a limp ball of FOMO. New fishing waders, sexy, bargain, great deal, last chance. Buy now, Steve.
Back at Patagonia HQ, the team was wading into dangerous waters. And those waters were full of tiny fish called customers. And those customers were getting wet. But not in a good way like fishes are supposed to be. And that made them angry.
So when the waiters shit the bed, The vibe was like a fire drill. All hands on deck. Everyone needs to figure it out.
So we had this brilliant idea. Why don't we just get the 6 people most responsible for making every product we make, the designer, the developer, the quality person, the materials person, and the product line manager together to find the solution.
That was really the start of the Waiter Task Force.
As you can tell by the shift in the soundtrack, this is when the team decided to get serious.
At that time, we were working with a cut and sew factory. It turned out we were asking this factory to do something that they were not capable of doing.
The problem at first was the leaking at the back seam.
So we developed a new seam tape, put the seam tape on a pair of waders, and sent it out for lab testing. We did this wash durability test called a killer wash.
How is that seam holding up, and what is it going to look like after months or even years of use?
We do zipper testing. We put it on this other machine, checking the tensile strength of it.
Or there's, I don't even know what the test is called, but it's this twisting test to test the torque.
What it is, now what it do, rock on and pop 'em, lock 'em on too.
It was amazing. The seam tape was so durable. One of the best seam tapes we've ever seen. And then it went out for field testing. And then we started getting leaks. We were like, what?
In the end, it was pretty much all of the seams were compromised.
According to the dictionary, compromised is just a posh way of saying crappy or shite.
All right, so what's the big deal? This all seems very, very time-consuming and expensive.
Yvonne has a saying, and this is really, it's something that's instilled in many different parts of our organization, where if we do the right thing, the business will grow. I would always rather be in the business of doing fewer things better than be in the business of slinging cheap stuff for the sake of consumerism.
In the early days of Patagonia, the problem was that people were buying it too much. Some people had, every colorway of a snap tee that we made. And then someone got this bright idea to really talk about, how do we convince people to only buy what they need?
World-renowned company famous for outdoor clothing and gear, encouraging consumers to limit their spending to help Mother Earth.
Our niche is to make something better. So we're going to try to make clothing that lasts as long as possible.
Yvonne believed that when designing the product, the first thing you should do is make it durable. After that, you make it repairable, and that's really about extending the time in the wild of the jacket for as long as you can. After that, we've thought about resale. We have our wornwear business, so we want to make it resellable. And then finally, when the thing is so thrashed that it ends up in a pile, we want to ensure that we can harvest those ingredients and put them into the next useful life.
So when we build these waders, we're thinking about how we're going to keep them in use as long as possible so that we don't have to keep on creating new.
But if making things that last forever is good for business, then how did we get to the point where the majority of the clothes we buy are designed to last about as long as a pet hamster in a kindergarten class? For that, we need to go back and ask our historian, who seems to have dozed off.
Go ahead.
Talk? Okay. This whole story is an intensification of the story that began with imperialism. But there are certain things that you can point to. Like in the 70s, this multinational accord was signed called the Multi-Fiber Agreement. This was a response to all of the apparel that was coming into the US market from Asia. So each country could only send a certain amount of garments to the US each year. And in 2005, the Multi-Fiber Agreement went away. Pretty much overnight, the price of clothing drops in half. And to the astonishment of big stores who hadn't seen this coming, people pretty much, without missing a beat, just started buying twice as much.
According to our producers, buying twice as much is nearly double the amount previously bought. And this math was multiplied even farther by a new thing called the internet, which until that point had been used mainly by men with bad haircuts before they morphed into modern-day robber barons.
The speed with which something can go from an image to a purchase to the manufacture to the shipping is like stunning. So it just kind of exponentially increasing in speed.
The opening of the cheap clothing floodgates along with the speediness of the internet combined to create something called the turbo apparel canon, which was later changed to fast fashion because of alliteration.
Fast fashion is only possible when you have pennies being paid to the worker to make that garment. And it supports a global system of trade that is deeply unequal and very invisible. I think most people aren't really aware of the global system that brings them their clothes. And I think that's true of a lot of commodities. I think that people go to the store and see bananas for 40 cents a pound and don't wonder about that. One thing you can know if you buy a cotton t-shirt from a store is that it probably used about 700 gallons of water to produce it. You can pretty much be sure that the water came from somewhere in the global south. You can be pretty sure that somebody sewed it. I think people kind of imagine that clothing is made by a robot or a machine, but it's not. It's made by a person, likely a woman. If you're a garment maker, you're going to look across the world to find the lowest labor costs. And there are mechanisms in place to allow you to do that. Cheap clothing is the product of a really exploitative system. It is so globalized and so diffuse. It doesn't tell you where the fabric was knit. It doesn't tell you where the cotton was grown. It's sort of notoriously difficult to trace these things.
So I took a little trip, went to some cotton fields, and boy, it was a real eye-opener. I mean, they're killing fields. There's nothing out there that's alive. And, you know, cotton was 20% of our sales. And I said, I don't care. I'm not going to do this.
We switched to organic cotton in 1996. And back then, there were issues of where's the supply chain? How are they growing it? How do we know it's organic cotton? Where are they getting the seeds? There was a whole lot that we didn't know going on in our supply chain. But we needed to know the impact of our materials and that the people involved in making the product have fair access to work and wage. But then in the summer of 2019, our folks on our social and environmental responsibility team held a meeting about this emerging issue in Xinjiang, which is one of the biggest growing regions for organic cotton in China and actually produces some of the highest quality organic cotton in the world. And they set us down and said, hey, product team, hey, materials and sourcing team, we think we have a problem.
Starting around 2019, you start to get more and more evidence that Uyghurs are being held in internment camps. Products from inside these internment camps are entering the global supply chain. Big companies are using cotton, textiles, and garments that are being produced by people in internment camps.
Brands, people who make things, we're the ones who need to take responsibility for what we know is happening on our behalf. And we need to be responsible for what's happening to the people in our supply chains. Once you flip the rock over and see what ugly bits are living underneath it, you don't have a choice to flip the rock back over. You have to fix it.
So if supply chains are hard to look inside of, and it's hard to verify the bits and pieces that go into our clothes anyway, what hope is there to know where things actually come from? For this part of the documentary, we travelled to New Zealand, where the scientists don't wear trousers. So we had to get clever about how we framed our interview shots.
So I think I read somewhere that you guys are essentially a silver bullet in terms of tracing supply chains.
No. Nope. So, I mean, unfortunately, we are not, and nothing is at this point.
The trouserlessness persisted, yet so did we.
At Oratane, we offer a novel way to scientifically verify the authenticity of a product in the supply chain. So if you were to give us the t-shirt, they do a little snip, they get put into a test tube, and they get ground up and then put into a mass spectrometer. We would analyze then the chemical components of your t-shirt that relate to origin, and then we're able to figure out where that t-shirt came from and where the products are grown.
We later found out that this hard-working scientist had sent his own trousers out for analysis in the name of science.
When we had enough information to make a decision about what's going on in Xinjiang, we had to sit down and say, here we are. We have the worst human rights situation that we've seen in our time going on in our supply chain. We have a whole lot of product and a whole lot of business exposed through this supplier, who, by the way, is our best supplier. But we gotta go. We don't have a choice anymore. We have to leave. We want to ensure that we are paying fair trade premiums at our factories, having our suppliers be transparent with us of where things were grown and who was involved. It's not a perfect system, but we do have some checks and balances in place. And if we have challenges tracing our relatively small, pretty well-mapped supply chain, imagine what a company 50 times our size is going to go through as they start to learn what their global supply chain footprint looks like.
But if it's so difficult to know where your stuff actually comes from, why do so many brands seem so certain all the time? Is it possible that they might be stretching the truth to appeal to their customers? More on that after the break.
Climate change is the great challenge of our lifetime. But at Patagonia, we rolled up our flannels to save humanity from its self-inflicted death spiral. We make nearly all of our clothes out of vegan hamburgers and double rainbows. And contrary to the laws of physics, we actually create more water for the planet, thanks to our hydro-positive Gore-Tex Expedition jackets. We've committed ourselves to protecting our furry friends by making our fleeces from upcycled Subarus. Not only has the wild fleece population doubled, but we've brought 7 previously extinct species back into existence, including the dodo bird, the golden toad, and the Macarena. When Earth was facing certain destruction from an incoming asteroid, Patagonia finally and literally fulfilled our company's mission to save the home planet by assembling a team of astronauts to fly into space, land on this death rock, and destroy it from within with an organic, plant-based atomic bomb just minutes before entering the Earth's atmosphere.
We interrupt this ad because it has come to our attention that these advertisements are all blatantly false. Unfortunately, this is all too common. Brands can lie to you in all sorts of ways, from misleading labeling to spurious claims about recycling and circular economies, and feel-good marketing that makes you think your clothes are made in a factory full of happy puppy dogs. We apologise for the inconvenience. The corporate muttonhead has been sacked. Now back to our programme for the exciting conclusion of the Waders saga.
I definitely woke up many days, 4 a.m., 3 a.m., couldn't sleep. Because if a company is saying that they are sustainable, the waiter couldn't fail. If it fails, you kind of fail.
So you know how most people say, you do your best thinking on the throne? For me, it just happened to be in bed. I was just laying there just stressing about this, and that's where it came to me. And I brought it up. It was the funniest thing ever. My managers, to everybody there, I go, hey, why don't we do this, double seam tape? They go, what do you mean double seam tape? I'm like, oh no, it's just gonna cost too much and this and that. And so they said, make a prototype, send it out for field testing, and see what we get.
When we are field testing, we're trying to condense months or years of use into a short time frame, really pushing those products to their absolute limits, above and beyond what a standard user would be doing.
We do field testing for all of our different sport categories, for all of our products.
It's gonna be a strictly no fun allowed day today.
How do those feel right now?
My hand's bleeding, my jacket's full of holes.
No product going forward was going to go out into the market with less than 6 to 12 months of as brutal, as deep, and as torturous of field testing as we can find.
I want to go home.
Yeah.
We got some waders back, did the final inspection of air testing the waders.
This was the real test. They either work or they don't.
And I shit you not, the results were amazing. There's no leaks. So then what do? We start double seam taping everything. And till this day, no complaints.
There are two important lessons to be learned here from the whole fishing trousers debacle. The first being, most things can be fixed with tape. And the second being, making things that last a long time is actually quite hard, even if the solutions are rarely simple. But it's something we have to do if we're not to drown in a sea of cargo shorts on an unlivable planet.
Quality is lifetime's work, and the work is nowhere near finished, and we don't even have it all figured out. But from the time that the company was making pitons throughout its history, quality has really been the hallmark. And we believed then, and we believe now, that still the best thing you can do for the planet is make a product that lasts as long as possible.
So in theory, no product should end up in a landfill, but especially waders will not end up in a landfill.
As you can probably tell from the tone of this last bit, we've arrived at the end of the documentary. But the end of this documentary is just the beginning for you. Whether you're a 21st century wiggy bureaucrat, a well-intentioned corporate muttonhead, or just a regular old modern-day Stephen. Unlike this caveman, you have access to things like all the knowledge that's ever been invented, and basic hygiene. But much like our mangy ancestors, we have survival instincts that drive much of our decision-making. The problem is, these mechanisms have been hijacked by a machine that only exists to turn resources into money. And it's probably going to kill us all.
One of the questions that people ask me is there any hope? Luckily, we are creatures of adaptation. We change our priorities, change our values. We have an extraordinary capacity to solve problems.
And like our Stephen ancestors have done over the course of thousands of years, we too can adapt by learning that real happiness is found outside of an online shopping cart.
What makes me happy is making things, to picture things and then to manifest them with my hands.
What makes me happy? Gosh, whiskey? That's one.
I'm a really curious person, and I really like solving problems.
Knowing, I guess, hopefully that you're having a positive impact on like yourself and others.
The things that correlate with what we call happiness in every study of this topic are relationships and a sense of purpose.
Above all, though, don't forget to pull over once in a while. Spend a moment outside with a loved one and appreciate all of the gifts Mother Nature has to offer. In these matching Patagonia, his and hers Karma Donkey puffy jackets, now half off with promo code STEVE.
You gotta love a superhero.